All right, welcome back to the Media Mindset. I'm Kenny Klein. I've got David Tao, co-host, with me today, and our guest for today's show is Kamiu Lee, CEO of Activate. Well, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So Kamiu and I know each other back in our lowly business school days when we were just two academic folks looking to learn. That's the MBA student, right?
Right.
That's what everyone perceives as just
pursuit of knowledge.
Pursuit of knowledge.
2 full years of knowledge.
Yeah. A lot of books, a lot of tests, studying, barely talk to anyone. But now you're CEO of Activate, which is very cool. Do you mind just telling us about Activate, what you all do, and how you ended up running this cool company?
Sure. So Activate, we are an influencer marketing platform connecting over 150,000 creators globally to brands, media companies, and agencies that may be looking to work with anyone from someone that might be, a reality TV star that has amassed a social following to nano influencers who are, influencers with 5,000 in following. There's a lot of different use cases that are emerging in terms of how folks are partnering with creators today. You have media companies that are looking for talent to put into their content, to feature into their content, to certainly brands looking to build direct relationships with influencers. I somehow ended up in this company from after business school, but I actually started out in finance, in investment banking. But I had been an early, I would say, adopter of some of these, fashion blogs, beauty blogs in the early days. Emily Weiss of Into the Gloss, or who's now, running Glossier, to Leandra Medine of Man Repeller. I remember consuming that content and thinking, this is going to be a really interesting way to kind of distribute content in the future.
Mm-hmm. So Activate works with a lot of, you said a pretty broad range of both brands and influencers, big scale, the nano influencer tier.
Yep.
I liked how you gave that definition because my first question was, what is a nano influencer? But that 5,000 is a good ballpark mark. What did Activate start with as far as tier of influencer? Was it a little more gated, and as you onboarded more folks to the platform, it kind of broadened in who could join, who could become an influencer? How did it start?
So our how we started is interesting. We didn't start out planning to be an influencer marketing company. We initially built a tool called Bloglovin for fashion bloggers in Sweden to follow each other's content, essentially. So that was where a lot of these initial kind of fashion bloggers were popping up in the Nordics, essentially. It was a tool created for them. They started sharing it via word of mouth, and Bloglovin as a platform grew to over 600,000 bloggers globally. And mostly lifestyle, women's lifestyle space, so fashion, beauty, travel, home, food. We continue to own that platform. It's a great distribution platform for us for influencer content. But as the industry emerged, where we saw brands approaching us and asking us for introductions to certain bloggers, to certain creators, and then you had YouTube, Instagram, newer social channels popping up, that was really where Activate started becoming an incremental platform that we built. So we benefited from initially launching a tool for the creators. They, came onto that platform. We were able to onboard a huge subset of those onto the Activate platform that we built out. And today we continue to curate and recruit new talent onto the platform. We're looking at TikTok, we're looking at Twitch, newer channels that could be really interesting. But we think about it not as number of influencers, but more so what are the communities that we want to go after. Just a good example, fathers, essentially, we have this group called Dad Bods, and it's literally just dads that are creating interesting content about being new parents, to LGBTQ, to wine connoisseurs, people that talk about wine all the time. So that's how we think about kind of building out the community. Yeah.
So in terms of the platform and the relationships, you have a lot of moving parts. What's your core identity when you go to work? What's got to be at CEO vision, like what are you doing? Or are you doing it all and like kind of like playing the middleman for everyone?
I would say that as a company, we have a team of engineers, product, data folks. We have a team of folks that are working with influencers day in and day out. So ideating on ideas, recruiting influencers, executing influencer programs. And then we have kind of brand partnerships, sales type function in the organization. Where I spend my time right now is really understanding what are the different use cases for influencers, essentially. Like, what are all the different ways that you could partner with creators? That's by talking to as many of our clients as possible. So spending a lot of time on the client side right now, bringing feedback back to our product and technology team, making sure we're building things that people actually want to use. Anytime you commit to something in a sprint and for the developers, it's a lot of hours, a lot of dollars going into that, and wanting to make sure that we're absolutely building the right thing. So I'm spending a lot of time just kind of making sure there's strong communication between the teams, and we're pulling in information feedback from the market.
One thing that's been fantastic about this podcast, and this is actually our 10th recording. I'm not sure if the air ordering will be exactly that, but we've talked with many of our guests about influencer marketing, influencer acquisition, and people view it in many different ways, I'm finding out. Some people see it as a fantastic tool to connect with communities. Some people on the brand side see it as a necessary evil. Some people on the brand side absolutely love it. There's just a lot of variance.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that maybe a brand might have when they're approaching a group of influencers about how that process is going to go?
Yeah, there's a lot. Okay, so I think that it's different from other mediums, different from other channels of marketing, because you're dealing with people and you're asking for people to create content on your behalf. There's a lot more creativity and a lot more flexibility there, which also means that there's a lot of different ways that you can go wrong. So in working with a creator, I think a lot of times when you reference like misconception, there's potentially, thinking about it as product placement. Like you want this person to be an ad for you, essentially, and that generally doesn't usually translate very well. So meaning like you're giving them your product, you're like, okay, the product needs to be a certain amount of the shot. You're basically overly controlling the situation. That doesn't translate well typically because the influencer has spent probably a number of years building up an audience. That audience can figure out very quickly if this content does not look like the rest of the content that they've been publishing for the last couple of years and the reason why they're following this influencer in the first place. So really like getting at a true partnership with the creator and understanding how to integrate your product in the right way or your brand or your service in the right way is really important. Selection of the influencer is really important. I think in the last couple of years, you've seen a huge expansion of content creators out there. You go back 2 or 3 years ago, there was really this these larger influencers that were getting all of the brand partnerships. They were usually rep by talent managers, and they were kind of like the top 1%. And there was fear to work with smaller creators. Now you have a lot of brands actively looking to work with smaller creators. And what that means is that there's just this huge group of influencers out there, some of whom are really good at what they do at content creation and are really passionate about connecting with their audiences, some of whom may have come into the space for the wrong reasons. And you need to be thoughtful about how you select who to partner with, essentially. So it's no different than, in a sense, it's no different than, having to test, iterate, figure out which partnerships work for you, like any other marketing channel. I think the biggest difference is that there's so many different ways that you can go that it's easy to potentially go the wrong way. The other thing that comes to mind is I think a lot of brands want to provide product and just hope that influencers will continue to post for free for them. And depending on the brand, the price point, the product, that could work to a certain extent. But then they're not taking that next step and figuring out, well, of the 100 influencers that you gave your free handbag to or your free mattress to or whatever, which ones of those actually are performing for you? Did any of them convert for you? Did any of them drive, traffic or whatever the metric or KPI is? Those are the ones that you really want to actually lock into longer term partnerships. And those are the ones you want to pay. And it's worth the investment. And so I think there's a lot of this first part going on, and then and then people start dropping off because the influencers kind of figure out that, there's nothing more beyond that.
And does your platform help like us or brands track down the road where it's like you gave out these 100 mattresses and like what happened after that?
Yeah, so a part of our platform that we recently launched is called Influencer Relationship Management. It's the ability to essentially track large sets of creators. So you have a lot of direct-to-consumer brands out there right now that are literally working with 1,500 influencers per month, right? And of those 1,500, they've isolated that 500 to 600 of them really perform for them. And then the other part of it, they're just testing and seeing, who they want to keep, you want to continue to work with. So the idea is to be able to track over time. Someone that's working for you for 6 months or a year, maybe after a while they've saturated their audience and maybe they're not working for you anymore as well. So it's something that, to be able to track that and consistently kind of check back and make sure that you're investing in the right relationships. That's kind of what we're hoping to solve with our technology.
You mentioned a little earlier in the conversation that you all are spending a lot of time and resources investing into influencer acquisition and activation on newer platforms. You mentioned TikTok, you mentioned Twitch. Which platform kind of has you most excited right now for the potential on both sides, what it can do for brands, what it can do for influencers, what it can do for your company and how you're going to be interacting with it and shepherding that process?
Yeah, so right now we have integrations with all the major social platforms on our platform essentially, but there's newer channels, TikTok, Twitch, and when I say channels, it doesn't even have to be a social channel. We know that there's a subset of influencers that are building out their own email newsletters. And those email newsletters are sub-scale and they can't really monetize it, but we're looking at 40% open rates. We're looking at like astronomical click-through rates. And so how do you package that in the right way? If you're partnering with an influencer, if you know that they also have this channel, how do you incorporate that into the partnership? There's also Facebook groups, which I'm pretty excited about. Performs really well. And there's different elements to keep in mind for Facebook groups. There's usually kind of rules in place for the groups, but how do you leverage that if there's an influencer that has a group that they actively manage or they're part of a group that they're part of? So those are some of the things that, those are some of the channels I'm excited about. Podcasts is another one. A number of creators, usually the larger ones right now that are starting podcasts, and that's another avenue to explore.
Mm-hmm. Well, just to put us on your radar, as I don't even know if we're nano influencers. I think Natalie
sub-nano.
Natalie called us Natalie Sportelli, who was a guest who I know you've worked with before.
Yeah.
She called us Pico influencers.
Pico. I haven't heard that one yet.
It's but we're working our way toward nano. Just you wait.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Can I ask, I don't know how public you can be, but do you have like a case study of like who are the brands or who's a brand that just like crushes using your platform and like just does it all right, like does all the things you just said that you should do? Like, do you have like a case study for us or someone that you just...
Yeah, I think, I can certainly reference some brands that we work with. I think that the kind of like strategy that I referenced with regards to, large sets of influencers, testing that. We're seeing that more from the direct-to-consumer type brands right now, the younger, smaller brands. That being said, we're also seeing some pretty big brands out there, in the likes of like a Tinder or which to me is like a big company as part of IAC, to the Walmarts of the world that are also really coming up to speed very quickly and doing a lot of interesting things when it comes to influencer. With regards to case study, something that comes to mind there's actually a national jewelry retailer that recently started using the platform, and they have so many locations across the country, and they took a really interesting strategy of really finding hyper-local creators in key markets where maybe those markets haven't been performing as well for them, and they really wanted to target those specific. It was actually not the major cities, it was some of the smaller cities, and they wanted to find a way to integrate influencers beyond just posting about the brand or the product. They had the influencers go in store, pick up product there essentially, so integrate it in a way that was a little bit beyond your standard kind of influencer post.
Right,
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah.
What are some niches? So we work in niche content, right? We love finding communities that we think are underserved when it comes to
Yeah.
really, really quality content. Over the course of your time at Activate,
Yeah.
even before it was Activate, when it was
Yeah.
Blog Love, and you mentioned the lifestyle, the fashion,
Yeah.
food, home, family. What are some communities that have really surprised you as far as having like really fervent, engaged followings?
Yeah. We're constantly scouting for these new communities. That's a super important part of, even though it's not technology, it's really like curation and finding these right groups. Certainly there's a lot of underserved communities from a ethnicity, from a diversity standpoint. We are seeing groups of, creators, maybe African-American influencers, Latina influencers that perform really well when it comes to their content. They have great engaged audiences. And I think, if you go back a couple of years, they weren't getting those brand deals. I think now there is more attention and more dollars flowing in this direction, also because of brands that are looking to really target certain communities, and this is a really great way to do that. There's really not that many, if you think about, if you were to look to target those communities and you're spending dollars with media publishers or other channels, there's not as many options. And so these content creators really serve a need for the audience and also for the advertisers. In terms of other niches beyond just, the diversity piece, we have seen specific life moments. So it's not necessarily a community in that sense because it's ever changing, but for example, for a financial services brand, we've had to look at folks that were in the midst of a major life change. They were purchasing a new home, they were renovating a home, and being able to talk about that over like a 6 to 9 month period in partnership with a brand that performed extremely well because you're tapping into something that was personal and real for the creator.
And I don't know if you remember this, but like 3 or 4 years ago, we had lunch, and JAKK Media were always looking for niches too. And I asked the same question, and then you told me knitting.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
like a big one.
Yes.
And I went out and took a knitting course because I was like, I gotta and it's like amazing community, a really big community.
It's a
actually.
huge community.
Like
It's not even a niche.
I think you knit, right? Or did you?
I don't, but knitting was one of those terms that we found trending within Blog Lovin', as well as it was just, and we saw that there was this huge community that got together, whether it was on Twitter, whether it was on Instagram or YouTube, there were just groups of these folks that were, coming together.
Yeah, it was the best example of an underserved niche.
Forgot about
I've
that one. That was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
That was a while ago,
We've left it behind too, but it was just the prime example of this community that there are a lot of influencers and big sites, and one of the biggest sites in the space is just for us web people is just probably one of the worst things I've ever seen. But everyone just loves it and gets all their patterns from it and whatever community stuff from it.
It's not slick, it's not glossy, but it speaks to a specific audience and it works.
Do you remember the name of it? I'm forgetting.
I don't. But
One thing I'm learning.
It's a weird name, but
one thing I'm learning about from this conversation is that the knitting community they're ready to get down to business. They don't want the flash. They don't want the bells and whistles. They're just we want our patterns. We want our materials. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend knits. She is very. I was kind of joking there, but I'm not joking. She's her knitting time is. She's in the zone.
People, it became this whole meditation thing, or the articles say this anyway, so I believe them. But there are a lot of secret knitters out there. When I mentioned this, everyone would be like, "Oh yeah, I knit."
yeah.
And
I
was
wasn't
like,
surprised to find out that you were getting into knitting. I think it suits you well, actually, Kenny.
I don't know. I don't know if I was a
can
little
see
too
that.
intense for the knitters. Like,
Oh wow.
I had this great moment in a knitting shop where I had been trained by this woman, and I was like, "Give me the finest yarn you have." And she's like, she goes in the back, she rustles, she brings out this yarn, and I was like, I was just guessing. I was like, "I know you've got better than that." And she's like, "How did you know?" And she goes back and she's like, "This is super merino wool that like only comes from like one spot in Patagonia."
special stuff.
And I was
Yeah.
like, "This is it."
Yeah.
I've been known to do
I've
that.
got a very nice, very nicely quality yarn, but not very well knitted scarf that I do have.
I've been known to pull that move in a cheese shop or two.
I believe it.
No. Give
me the good
stuff. I know what's up. Give me your
I
good
want the
stuff.
off-menu stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, these communities are so interesting.
I mean, fitness instructors. I mean, that one's
Yeah.
not so hidden, but crazy engagement.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's like an unlimited. I mean, interior designers definitely seeing more of this like real life relevancy. Like, why are they creating this content? Sometimes it's because they're just passionate about it. But if your day job is in that area as well, it makes it even more impactful. So we're seeing those groups of folks kind of emerge.
Sure. What about, do you have any like grouping of these types of influencers where it's like, hey, we're a bunch of knitters in Tallahassee and we're all promoting some product for some brand? Do you help them all kind of
Group
sync
up.
with each other as well, or is
That is something actually that we're actively talking about, and like creating, like facilitating that flow. I mean, the reality is in real life, a lot of these folks within the same community know each other already,
Sure.
right? And so, what if we could facilitate that more digitally on the platform? That'd be amazing. We do have events, like we recently had a wellness event where it was, broadly wellness influencers, which range from fitness to clean beauty to, and when we brought them all in the room, they all kind of knew each other already. A lot of them already, and so, so for sure, I mean, there's definitely that community that's already taking place, off platform, off social. Yeah.
I think sometimes what I've seen, my wife is a painter, and she is pretty.
She's kind of an influencer.
She's
got a big following.
she's
and
bigger
like
than
decent
Nano even.
following.
I don't know what the next tier is up,
I
but
think she might just be an influencer.
She's an influencer.
she might just be an influencer. Yeah, and so a lot of times we'll go to a gallery or something, and she'll meet someone else who also
And she'll post about it.
she'll post about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
so she's got that, but she'll meet someone in person, and they'll know each other, but they've never like met each other in person.
Okay.
They're just kind of like
they know each other socially.
yeah,
on
socially.
social.
Yeah. So like,
So I should.
but that introduction is always
Yeah.
useful in person because it solidifies like a
Oh yeah, there's
relationship.
always a better connection in person. I mean, I've definitely have looked at artists that your wife posts. So
Oh, yeah.
I would consider her an influencer. Like, she's influencing me
Yeah,
from the art world.
yeah. They only want art. Her followers. Anytime there's a photo of me,
So that's like
they're
an amazing
devastated.
audience.
So,
I have bad news for you.
Yeah.
Engagement just dropped to zero.
it really is. It's very, very.
I
low.
like those posts. I double tap.
Yeah, she gets like 6 loyal likes on those. The rest
Yeah,
get thousands, but
No, I mean she has curated an audience that cares about art. So at some point, maybe not right now, but at some point, if you're thinking about, like, I'm just thinking about even like some of these art platforms out there, like an Artsy or Artifact Uprising, or like she would be a very natural partner for some of
right. Well, artists are tough. She would never do it, but artist is a rough one to use as an influencer, intentionally anyway. But
Are there any influencers and I know you've interacted with literally thousands of influencers personally,
Yeah.
your platform, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
Are there any influencers right now? Could be in any industry, could be a nano influencer
Yeah.
or tiered up from that.
they were Nano until they got mentioned right now.
Yeah, I mean this is the JAKK media, the media mindset bump.
Let's blow somebody up.
Is there any influencer who you look at and just really think is pushing the envelope in a good way? That might just be someone you've interacted with recently.
Pushing the envelope. So there's a few that kind of come to mind. I mean, one is there's an influencer. She's based in LA. She's pretty big, so she's I call her like an OG. She's been around for a while. She has a site. She has Snap. She has Instagram. She has a podcast. But I consider her as like a full-fledged publisher. Gotcha. She has a team. She is someone that I find her very interesting because it's someone that I don't personally identify with her. Like if I came across her on social media, I wouldn't necessarily say like, I feel like I'm like her. But if you start consuming her content, and I was talking to a few other people about this recently, you start consuming her content, you can tell that she really cares about everything she talks about. She talks about like 1 million products. I mean, she's a consumer of product, right? And so she will talk about like literally fiber crackers, like beauty products, like fitness things, like everything. But everything that she puts in front of her audience, I really think that she really likes, she really cares about, and she recommends them. They are sponsored deals. I think she's one of the few that have been able to do it to such an extent, and still like the audience really, like I believe it, even though I'm in the industry, and I still like, I'm like, I know she's getting paid for all of this, but it's really, really good. She does she'll post about things that, maybe she's not sponsored for, but she just really loves the product, really loves the brand. And she really lives and breathes those products, and she's really able to talk about it in depth, fully review it, fully, and I'm amazed by how many channels that she's able to really maintain and publish on as well. So she's someone, Skinny Confidential, that's her, that's her name, but Lauren is her name, but it's really fantastic, and she's really running that whole, as like a real business. There's another creator, Brandon Bryant. He's based in New York, and he is also an investor. Of Harlem Capital, actually, he lives in Harlem. Creates a lot of great content, partners with a lot of fantastic brands. He's unique in the sense that he feels very, I guess, like what we call internally, like a very three-dimensional creator. Like there's a lot of layers to, and how he spends his time, how he creates content. Trying to think when you say push the needle. I mean, there's also different creative executions that have been really interesting. I forget her name, but there's like a ballerina who creates really beautiful content with clothing. Like she's just like a dancer, and she's great. And when you say like an artist, that she might not want to work in that sense, but if you're able to actually take that art lens and like parlay it into your content, she's been really, we've worked with her on a few things, and it's been really breathtaking to see the content that comes from her. Yeah.
You mentioned have a three-dimensional creator. I was going to ask, like, what's the inside baseball lingo? What are some of the terms? So I think that's perfect. I learned a new term. I'm going to start using that for things that don't qualify.
Sounds par for the course.
I'm a three-dimensional editor.
Yeah. I believe that.
Wonderful. Well, so great to have you on today. When people are looking to learn more about you and more about Activate, where can they go?
Yeah, our website is activate.social, and that's our social handles as well. And me, I have social handles, but I'm not an influencer. I don't have a lot of following, so I would just say go to the company site.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. This was fun.